Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll watch it on John's Facebook. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Under your name, or is it a group?
It's in the SDAQ&A group.
Oh, okay. All right. Then.
John's already a member in there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool.
Right, here we go. And if I get kicked off, we'll just have to bear with me. Because I did that today. And I got put back in. Can you see there if it's come online?
It's saying it's recording, Peter.
Oh, good. Oh, here we go.
Don't go too far. Well, listen if I call out.
Well,
Okay. I've tagged you in there. And let's see how we go. I think we're live. We're alive.
Wow.
So we'll just wait a couple of seconds and let some people join in, and then we'll kick off officially. And I'll just say a little welcome to the podcast, because it goes to the podcast as well as the live feed. So just give that a couple of minutes. Okay, hang on a second. Just gonna get... Hey Lance, I'm not sure if you can hear.
Hello.
I'm just going to put you in the waiting room. Is that all right?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, mate. And if you think of any questions near the end, I'll bring you in to ask a couple.
Okay.
And back to here. There we go. Okay. Hey everyone, and welcome to another SDA Q&A. My guest today is Dr. John R. Godfrey, who from here on in we'll just call John, if that's okay.
Right.
And can you just do a little mic test there for me, John? Testing.
G'day, Peter.
Oh, brilliant. I can hear you. It's great to have you here, John. Thanks for being willing to chat about Glacier View and all things Adventist for a little while, because I think you left the Adventist Church 27 years ago.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And you were an Avondale student and also a lecturer at Avondale. And later on we're going to talk a bit about that and what you're doing now as well. But I just wanted to quickly share, while we're waiting for more people to come along, I just wanted to share one of my memories I have of you when I was a student under your tutelage at Avondale College. And the class was, I think, Statistics 101 or something like that. And it came to the end of the year, and you had us all kind of lined up in the hallway, and we'd be ushered in, two or three of us at a time, and you'd kind of give us our grade. And you were looking at my report or whatever, and you said, "Oh, are you Rob Dixon's son?" And I said, "Yes." And you said, "Oh, if I'd known that, I would have given you a better mark." And then I noticed, and I said, "Hey, John, I've noticed that you haven't written down a mark yet, so maybe you can reconsider." Oh, good times, good memories. I loved your classes.
And all your marks are recorded. in the marks books behind me. I've still got them.
Can you put it in your will that when you pass, you give them all to me, and I'll tear out my page, but I'll use the other as leverage. I'll bribe people. I have to admit that, you know, like I loved college, but it was a social thing for me. As I think it was for a lot of people in the early 80s, we just kind of
Indeed.
yeah.
Yes.
So look, it's great to have you here. Welcome, and it's great to have some people watching live on our Facebook SDAQ&A page, and also people will be listening to the podcast as well. So welcome everybody. And John, when we kind of chatted briefly before the other day, you were mentioning that when you were actually a student at Avondale, you had Colin Standish and Des Ford as lecturers.
Yes, indeed.
And
yes.
in many ways, you could sort of trace back all of the tensions that erupted at Glacier View to those two men. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts and memories of Des, and also of Colin Standish, who sadly has passed away as well as Des?
Des was unique, Peter. I never had another lecturer or teacher like him. I never had another teacher or lecturer that took a personal interest in me like Des. Even Alan Barcan, who was my PhD supervisor and who I went to see probably three days before he died, who I was very close to, and spent time in his home. Even people, and Gordon Box back in Carmel days. But Des was unique. He was unique in the influences. There's certain things that I could not do for 20 years after my days, 30 years after my days at Avondale, that I didn't think of Des.
Wow.
From simple things in life, like, Des was fairly extreme in health reform. And, should I have butter on my toast or not have butter on my toast? What would Des think? Colin was always, and I only had Colin for, only 6 months, in fact, to be fair, but he was there a couple of years. Colin was always the Christian gentleman.
Mm.
Yes, I had no problems with Colin as a student at Avondale. I met him a couple of times afterwards, and unfortunately he wouldn't lay odds with me against the end of the earth, which I thought was not fair. If he was sprouting the ends of the earth and I was prepared to put up $100 against him, and he wouldn't take my bet.
Are you saying he wasn't, you...
And I'm still here, so I would have won the bet.
Something you said there about, they both were men of actually integrity and came from a genuine source. I think they were both very genuine men.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important thing to realise as you kind of follow the trajectory towards Glacier View, because they were both really fighting for something that they really believed in.
Indeed.
And I've listened to many hours of Des Ford material and many hours of the Standish brothers, Russell as well.
Yes,
and you cannot fault their integrity and conviction.
No. And Colin was very kind to me. He was the only Adventist lecturer that, and of course at Andrews, I think you could, in in the Master of Ministry or whatever they did there. I didn't do that. I did a Master of Arts, but and I think they couldn't in those years. But the only one that put a plus on my A, was Colin. Yeah,
fantastic. So were you born a Seventh-day Adventist?
Oh no, Peter, no.
No.
No, I was born. I was born to a family whose father was very religious, who back in the 1920s, a coal porter called on them in the outback of Western Australia, a little tiny whistle stop by the name of Payne's Fine. My grandfather was virtually a drunkard, but my mother instilled into my father that he should never drink, which he never did, but he was very religious. And some coal porters came one day and wanted to sell my grandmother some books, and she said, if the boy can read them, we'll buy them. And the boy could read them. So my dad was always very religious. My dad became a Pentecostal minister, left that very early because he had 4 or 5 children, and we almost starved to death on the offerings and things. But he very quickly accepted Adventism. Once he heard about Adventism, he quickly accepted it. And I had read a book by Leakey, God's Message to Modern Man or something, and I was virtually an Adventist before my dad was, but it was very close. Yeah.
Was there a minister that had come to town that he had studies with, or was it just from reading? And
he sold insurance, farm to farm, door to door. Knocked on an Adventist's home one day, and they got to chatting about things religious, which my dad would be pleased to do. And the Seventh-day Adventists got him interested and actually lent him the God Speaks to Modern Man, which I read.
Right.
And became a Seventh-day. Though I went to my brother and brother-in-law's reading of their marriage bands, I think they call it, or something, in the Methodist church one night, because I was to be their best man. And I hadn't been to church. I'd been to Sunday school, but hadn't been to church for years. Well, virtually never, since I left Sunday school as a child. And I thought, I must go back to church. And anyway, I said to my mum, now, which church should I go to? She said, well, don't go to those Church of Christ, she said, because they make you feel like a sinner. So that's
ironic.
And I was baptised into the Church of Christ, and within 12 months or even less, I was accepted in on fellowship into the on a previous baptism into the Adventist Church.
Right. So what age were you then?
21.
Right.
Yeah, probably approaching. I went to Carmel as king of the little kids. I was 22 and I was in class with a young lady who was 13. She had started school the year I dropped out. We were both in the same class together. Not at the same school, but
no.
Same year.
Just because of the timing.
Yes, just because of the timing. And I was there with a wonderful teacher called Alida Lindsay, who's still alive.
Wow. So after college and before you became a lecturer at Avondale, tell us when you graduated and what you did between those years.
I graduated in '66 with the likes of Bruce Roberts, Peter Jensen, Brian Craig, Vern Parmenter, in fact.
Right.
Norm Young was a year ahead. The guy who wrote on Alan White, Graham Bradford was a couple of years ahead.
Right.
So I graduated in 66.
That's an incredible bunch of people.
Yeah. Then in 67, I was called to the Brisbane camp, the Brisbane conference, and my conference president was none other than Keith Palmer.
Really?
Yeah.
On your first call out? Wow.
Keith Palmer.
Did you meet him?
I worked under one of Keith Palmer's best friends.
Right.
A delightful man, Pastor Bernard Foster.
Right.
But I only lasted a year because I was always interested in further study.
Yeah.
And the ministry wasn't for me, Peter.
Yeah.
They had a program just recently, ring up about the worst job you've ever had in your life. So I wasn't, it was only last year. So, and this guy gets on about how he was working in a sewage farm, and another bloke gets out about how he was working with pigs. And I got on there and said, the worst year I ever had in my life has been a Seventh-day Adventist minister. I said, why? Well, see, I was young. I was immature. I hadn't had the birth of a child. I hadn't had the death of a parent. I hadn't been divorced. I'd knocked about on the railways and things like that before I became an Adventist. But I was immature. And as my sister said, not very sympathetic. And as my good friend, Pastor Graham Loftus says, or Dr. Graham Loftus, Jack, you don't suffer fools gladly do. You know, I wasn't quite fit in my view, and I wanted to go on and do further stuff. I wanted to be a despot.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think people that don't suffer fools are great people. So good on you.
But I do now, Peter.
You do now.
I do now.
What are you saying about this interview? Hey, can I go back? Can I go back to the guys that were in your class? So in '66, so it was a 3-year course back then.
No, 4.
4 years back then.
4
So
years.
you started at 62.
Yes.
Or 3.
No, 63.
63, I mean.
They matriculated from the only person to matriculate from Carmel College in 1962. The rest got leaving certificates, but I was the only one who could go to university. We could all go to Avondale.
Yeah. But you could have gone to uni instead.
I could have, and it was arguably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. Not to go to
uni.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been a total different life path, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Totally different.
And as my good friend Graham Loftus says, and Jack, you would have stuffed up the other life too. Who needs friends?
There's no such thing as stuffing up your life. You could simply. Hey, so those guys that were in your class, and I guess no, don't apologise. Either side of it, Questions on Doctrine had been released late 50s, 57, I think. Yes. And people in that class have, if you look back, went on to become more interested in the new theology, and people who some people in that group also went on to become more traditionalists, wanting to return the church to more of a historicist kind of landscape. At that time, though, in the mid 60s, was there kind of tension between those two different groups around college?
We were basically disciples of theirs.
Right. Vern Parmenter as well?
What's that?
Vern Parmenter as well?
No.
Right.
No,
so were there tensions between Vern and his friends and you and your friends that were? No, I don't think so. When my dear friend, and who I appreciated a lot more, a great deal afterwards, and told him so, Russell Crans. When Russell came along, and there was tensions between Russell and Des, but they were always very,
very good. And there were tensions between Alfred Jorgensen and Des within our years, but we basically followed Des and Des's teaching, and were a little bit disturbed by some of the other teachings, though others thought that Kranz's approach was a much better approach, and Peter, it was. When I went out into the big bad world, you know, I started to appreciate what Russell was trying to tell us about the world and about a little bit of sociology. And one of the criticisms I have of Avondale is it didn't teach sociology and what the world was like and that sort of thing. And Des was a great teacher, a great theology teacher, lovely man, but a little bit naive sometimes as far as worldly issues were concerned, as were Adventists in general, Peter.
Yeah. There's a bit of an us and them thing that creates that, doesn't it? Yeah.
But there was some good, healthy going and throwing throughout the theology course in the 60s. It was good. Russell was good to come along with his emphasis on evangelism.
Yeah.
And Georgie, no one exegeted a passage of scripture like Alf Jorgensen. And I wrote and told him so. And I wrote and alerted him to what Milton had said about him in Milton's book. And Milton was right. I just sometimes wish that he hadn't been so frank in writing. But later on, I wrote to Alf and said, no. And he actually got his cousin on the phone to me. He wasn't up to talking at the time, to thank me for writing it. But there was that little bit of tension.
A little bit of a jostling, but it seems to me everyone was still be able to go to the cafeteria at night and eat together and break bread together.
And I mean, I disagreed with Russell Kranz over his universal salvation. But Des was emphasising you've got to hear the name of Jesus. You've got to accept Jesus Christ. And Russell said, well, how is that possible?
Where do you think things started to fray? Was it because I mean the Concerned Brethren movement officially kind of started in the mid-70s, was it?
I think so.
Where it was 16 or 19 pastors signed this document.
Yes.
Was it sent to Parmenter at the time, or was there a different SPD president at the time when they started to become more of a movement?
Look, I'm not much good on my I'm not sure. It may have been Keith Parmenter, or it may have been the president before him. Yeah. And I forget who the president before him was.
But I
certainly,
know.
Certainly the CBs hammered Keith Parmenter.
Right, in a way that, because my understanding is the previous, I've just got a mental blank, someone might write it on a wall somewhere so I can read it. I've got it set up so I can actually see people commenting, which is a new bit of technology for me. My understanding was there was this previous president to Keith that was quite supportive of Des and quite open to holding that tension in balance.
Yes.
But when Keith came on board, that there was perhaps a little bit more pressure put on him by the Concerned Brethren.
Indeed.
And he kind of was brought over to their side politically, maybe.
Yes.
I remember and so maybe that then starts to cause the tension, because once you have a movement that starts lobbying the leaders, that means there's going to be divisions and lines drawn in the sand.
And a very powerful movement. they were the retired, respected, long standing workers in the church that respected me. I remember, OK. Anderson, in Western Australia here, being very influential in bringing my father in. A very well-respected man. I'm not so sure now, but back then, yes, very, very well-respected. Some of those men were, yes. They were the sort of people who could put pressure on Keith.
Yes.
The ordinary laity, unless they had some good tithing power behind them, and I'm talking money here, couldn't put the same pressure.
No. Yeah.
It's like Bill was talking about the other day, those conferences in California. They got the money.
Yeah.
The general conference can go and jump.
Because
we've got the money. Show me the money.
We're going to stop contributing our 24 million a year or whatever it is, 79 million, I don't know.
Yeah.
But isn't that interesting? If you've got this kind of environment post Questions on Doctrine, where there is some kind of two different groups starting to emerge, but they're getting on okay. There's a bit of a robust debate conversation here and there. But as soon as you add money and politics, and a movement that wants to make an impact to their way of thinking, it just kind of tears everything down.
I remember talking to Des, walking with Des, which I did on many occasions, as a student, and saying to him, Des, these things are important, Des. You need to get them out there. Why don't you tell people about what you believe? Why don't you? He said, John, I can't.
Wow. Was this when you were a student? Wow.
Yes. He said, I can't.
Gillian has just written to us and said that Robert Frame and before that Elsie Naden were...
Oh, of course. Yeah. Elsie Naden and Frame.
And they kind of oversaw the differences. But I think like Jan Paulsen later on, he was able to also accept the balance of the two.
Yes.
So we get this movement kind of growing up, and I remember watching the Standish brothers, and they were kind of the two youngest signees or men who signed this document. Interesting note that by the late 70s, early 80s, when I was a young boy in Kurrambong, most of those people that signed that, the Conservative, lived in town.
Yes,
and I'd go to the takeaway, and I'd run into OK and have a good chat, and I'd run into Marx and have a great chat.
Raglan Marx.
Raglan and heaps of these guys, and I'd have discussions with them. In fact, I was involved with restoring the 1959 George Burnside 22 sermon series that he did in Christchurch.
Oh, wow.
And on these old tapes, and I restored them, me and a couple of others, and we released them. And and the Concerned Brethren, because I think I charged a couple of bucks just because we'd spent thousands of dollars on this thing, and they were having a go at me for charging for it. But it was an important document. Anyway, so when I was watching this YouTube clip, and the Standish brothers were saying that they were the youngest, but they also felt because they were the youngest and had a certain amount of energy, I think they were early 40s, they felt that it was kind of part of an important role for them to really get this thing moving. And so I think they started the lobbying, and they travelled everywhere. I don't think people realise the impact that the Standish brothers had on this movement. All the current fundamentalist independent ministries can be traced back to Heartland. They founded, and I think it's an interesting little path to follow there. So what year did you become a lecturer at Avondale?
I was away from Avondale for a decade.
Right.
So I went back at the end of 76 and started 1977. So that made the decade.
Right. And I think back to what we were just saying, the groundwork for the conservative breath movement was definitely started in the 60s, but it was really when they signed this document and started politicizing that it really started moving. So was Des there when you started lecturing?
Yes, just for the first 6 months.
What was that like to be under your mentor and then be a workmate?
He came to Western Australia and took a youth series down at Araluen Camp, and the youth leader in the West Australian Conference asked me to be his offsider, and so I preached beside him at that camp, and it was a wonderful experience. He told me during the camp that he one of the reasons he came was because Trevor Lloyd asked him to check me out.
Oh.
And in particular, because I had a stutter, I've in the last 20 or 30 years the stutter's gone. But you won't believe it, but I could never say statistics. And yet I taught, educational measurement and statistics, and I could never say it. I had to call it stats or something. but Trevor had him come over to check me out to see whether I'd be suitable for the education faculty.
Interesting.
Since I left Avondale, I'd picked up a master's from Andrews in religion and a minor in ed stats. And I'd done a Bachelor of Ed at the University of Western Australia, and I'd done a Master of Ed thesis in ed measurement there. And so, I actually handed my master's thesis in the day that I was called to Avondale. I went down in the morning, handed it in the afternoon, I got the call. But yeah, it was a great experience to be with Des, and that's the reason I went to Avondale, because Trevor had Des check me out.
And I chatted to Trevor the other day. He watched the interview with Bill Johnson and gave me a call, and it was fantastic. I've invited him to speak in the series, and I think he's going to. He wants to catch up for lunch first, and I said I'll shout him lunch once the COVID thing's gone on Friday.
Well, last time I met Trevor, last time I chatted to Trevor, he actually paid for my lunch.
I'll tell him it's going around in a circle. So you mentioned that Des was like, you'd said, hey, you've got these ideas and teachings and stuff, get them out there. And he was saying, no, I can't. Well, what led to Glacier View and the famous, Gillian sent me a link to it today.
Well, see.
This 1979 pre-Glacier View meeting.
From what I understand, the people who set up the meeting at PUC, the forum, said that he could say what he liked, and that there would be no repercussions. It was a forum meeting. This is
not Glacier View we're talking about now. This is the famous had to move venue because there were so many people.
Yes, where they continually seemed to have had to move because the numbers increased and increased. But
so he felt that he was going to be able to just share them, and it was just an in-house thing. No judgment.
Now he shared these things with us in class in fourth year, not before fourth year. But in fourth year he shared, the investigative judgment and a few of the problems. But he had a sheet of problems that he brought to class, all down, And I said to him, Des, would you mind, could I borrow that and photostat it? said, no, John.
Wow. So he was really keeping it
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
That's
He-
very interesting. I hadn't thought of that before. I've kind of felt that maybe he was bursting at the seams to share this stuff, but he was aware so much of the politics that he was happy to keep it a little bit closer until he was invited to a safe space to share the news.
I believe now, probably a couple of things I need to say. One, I don't interview well, Peter.
You're doing very well.
I've lost many a damn good job by not being a good interviewer. So I don't interview well.
Oh, you're talking about job interviews.
And the second thing is you must remember that I'm not here as a theologian. I've got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in religion, but I don't consider myself a theologian. I come here as a historian. I've got a PhD in history. I'm not much good on world history. I'm very good on Australian history. So I talk from a historian's point of view and drop in a few little personal things that I remember.
I value that, and we appreciate you being part of the program because I've learned a couple of things already because of it. So, and I think Gillian's watching right now. I'd just ask her if she could share the link to that famous meeting. There's an audio link of that she's tracked down. And so I just ask her to post it on a link.
See, Peter, when I heard the tape, and I remember I was doing Bruce Lowe was helping me with a computer program for ed measurement testing. And I listened to the tape, and it never affected me. It didn't surprise me. It didn't trouble me because Des had passed these things by us. And I didn't know what all the kerfuffle was about.
I think
but some people have said that, Des didn't have a political bone in his body. And I don't think he saw that, and I didn't.
No.
But another thing, Peter, I am a slow learner. But when I get hold of something, I hold it. Now, I was very slow in my appreciation of that forum. I was very slow in my appreciation, well, not quite as slow with the effects of Glacier View. But, mate, when I understood it, that was the end. That was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, right.
I was in Adventism for 33 years.
Yeah.
I've been out for 26. And the beginning of my end starts in 1980. The Sabbath of the 16th of August 1980, I'm reading from my...
yes, you've kept a diary. At any moment, read from your diary. We'd love that. So I think it's important, and this is something that's kind of dawned on me recently in something that Ross Cole actually mentioned somewhere on Facebook, and it made me realise that the progressive Adventists do have a birthright to their Adventism because the sanctioned release of questions on doctrine created a fertile garden for a progressive new theology to grow. I've tended to say sometimes in the past, well, look, just give it back because it's really doctrinally more, the more conservatives have a doctrinal claim that's more accurate if you look back historically. But it made me realise that actually no, the people that kind of developed this new theology and over the church quadrupled in size since the release of that book by the early 80s. So a heap of people came in because they were embraced that new theology.
Yes.
So they do have a leg to stand on and a claim to Adventism.
Yes.
So with that in mind, just bring us now from that famous meeting to Glacier View. How did that transpire from a casual kind of let's have a talk here to Glacier View? And for those that don't know Glacier View, just perhaps unpack what Glacier View the name means as well, like as in what it,
From what I understand is that the tape on the investigative judgment and its problems out of the forum meeting at PUC went around the world, or certainly around the Western world. And it came to the attention of folk like Keith and Wilson, the General Conference.
the Neil Wilson himself as well, yeah.
And they reckoned that Des had a case to answer.
Right.
Because this was historic Adventism. This was important to them. To me, Peter, I was never into apocalyptic bibliography, Bible text. I was never into eschatology. Theirs would be there in his Daniel and Revelation class in 1967, and a guy from out in the village by the name of Martin, a very good psychiatrist who helped my daughter, would be firing questions at Des from right up the back of the room. I used to sit right by Des like that, you know, his chief disciple, and we'd get these questions on eschatology, whether this was going to happen before that, and the last rain or something, wasn't it? And when the folk would be, Adventists would be sealed, and this. It used to go straight over my head. I wanted to hear about, I wanted to hear about Jesus.
The good news.
Yeah. And dear Pastor Frank Braid, but this forum talk on biblical eschatological nonsense, Peter, rocked the Adventist world. Mate, from where I sit, I don't get it. Now, from where I sit now, I just don't get it, Peter. What all the fuss was about those tapes.
Do you think that
and why couldn't Des? So,
well, I mean, after the meeting,
why couldn't he in a forum? He didn't do it. He didn't do it at a general conference session. He did it in an Adventist forum. Give us a break, mate.
So when we hit Glacier View, which was no longer a forum, what was it? Was it a calling to be judged and be held accountable?
It was a trial, mate. It was a witch hunt. It was, and remember from where I come from. Let me repeat it again. I come from it 26 years after I left the church, 1904. Well, we are 40 years. That's why you're doing it. 40 years from the Sabbath of the 16th to the 8th, 1988, when it all hit the faculty at Avondale. It beats me. It was a 18th, 17th, 16th century witch hunt. In my humble view. Des was on trial. Wasn't allowed to speak, I understand. I mean, I wasn't there. I only hear from folk. But Des wasn't allowed to speak. He was given 6 months. He was allowed to present his document. Hardly, I believe that a large percentage of the group never read it.
That's the 1,000-page document, isn't it, that he wrote?
Sorry to get emotional,
mate.
But it's still.
Well, when Bill Johnson was on the other night, and I really appreciate that he gave of his time to chat to us.
Yes.
When he was on, he said that he felt, and hopefully I'm getting it right, but that the Glacier View was an even bigger crisis for the Adventist Church than 1888.
Peter, it's the biggest. If you read Harry Bellis, his PhD, on the exiting of Adventist minister, mate, extended families
Mm.
left the church. Grandparents, their siblings and their grandchildren.
Mm.
And I can quote the families.
Yeah.
The families are close to them.
Mm.
Extended families left the church.
Mm.
Like you said, you had a young youth leader,
Mm.
and next minute the best they could do was a 55-year-old. I mean, yeah, I have trouble. I have trouble relating to my 60-year-old friends,
Yeah.
let alone young people. But 55-year-old has.
And some people have said, look, I shouldn't be running these interviews because we should just let the wound, not reopen the wound. And I've said to people, the wound is never closed. And I think it's important to talk about it to actually bring about some healing. I'm not naive enough to think there'll ever be some kind of reconciliation. In fact,
I mate, that's all right for you, but this has stirred me up. I didn't sleep last night. I went and I had my worst game of golf ever on Tuesday. If you asked me to come along, oh no, this hasn't opened all wounds, Peter.
that's because they weren't healed, John. They weren't healed.
No.
So we're gonna heal you tonight.
Sorry, but again,
sad time. Very sad time.
Partly forgotten, but not forgiven.
Mm.
Sorry.
When there was a moment, and I think Bill Johnson alluded to this the other night, where at the end of the meetings, they had a consensus document.
Yes.
And Des agreed to the points on that. And if it had been left at that,
yes.
he wouldn't have been defrocked.
Yes.
There'd be a growth within Adventism where there was left and right jostling, but it probably would have balanced out okay. All these ministers wouldn't have left. All these families wouldn't have left. But something happened last minute. Tell us a bit about that. The 10-point paper or statement. Was it the 10-point statement or something?
Yes. I understand that there was a consensus document. And I mean, the people to ask about this is Norm and Jill, because they were there, and particularly Jill, of course, her closeness to Des.
I'm chatting to Norm tomorrow.
Yes, I heard.
Tomorrow at.
But I understand that there was that consensus statement, and then the Australian brethren pulled out another document on this and presented that to him. And I think that Keith Parmeter was under so much pressure from the concerned brethren, so much trouble, and such a conservative that you know, one of the pillars of Adventism. There's you have to accept. You know, you've got to accept the 26, or has it gone to 28 now?
I think it's 28 with two parts.
Yeah. And I think that was it. That, okay, there is this consensus, but I think Keith wanted more. I think Keith felt he needed more. He needed Des to agree.
So this 10-point document, I guess, kind of was a little bit more divisive and highlighted the more extreme teachings, or not extreme, but the more differing, divergent views that Des had. And so Neil and Parmenter kind of just, I guess, wanted to support the more conservative guys and said, we're just going to push this through.
Yes.
So there was no vote, no right of reply. It was just Des was defrocked then.
Yes. Peter, in my diaries here, I wrote at one point the diaries for the day, and I'll read it to you if I can find it. Yeah, I've actually got some statements here on the 10 points. Yeah, the points that trouble me. This is, he has been made to sign a fairly stiff document, I say, for the 25th of August 1980. His manuscript has been shown to be in error in 10 problem areas, one of these being scholarship. He was not prepared to bend either. This upset some scholars. Points that trouble me, John Godfrey, that I write back 40 years ago. Palmer saying we have a representative church. Palmer saying the leaders crowing that all groups are in agreement. But the groups were structured so that agreement would be reached. The terms of the manuscript Des had to sign were too harsh. He's being blamed for all the trouble, a leak of a document, association with Grimsby, lack of tithe paying. And what Des had to do with lack of tithe paying, I'll never go. I talked to Duffy and Salem, and later with others of the faculty. They were fairly vague in biblical reasons for 1844, especially Duffy. He wants to retain Ellen White as an authority on doctrine, the same as Parmenter, etc., etc. And right through here, there's statements like, still worried about Des today. Spoke to Arthur Patrick. And I'll just, sorry, but I'll just see if I can find this statement, how I felt. I find it incredible. This is 40 years ago. I find it incredible that a man who taught me more of the love of Jesus than anybody should be fired from the ministry. They shouldn't have done it, mate. You just don't do it. Taught, and not only me, Peter, but hundreds of people. As I think it was Milton, and I mustn't quote people, let them speak for themselves, but I think it was Milton who said, if he'd gone off to Northern Europe, like somebody said he should, he would have turned the place upside down again. Because that's what Des was. Des was a preacher of the gospel. And it wasn't Des that was turning the church upside down. It was the gospel of Jesus Christ. Saved by the righteousness of Christ alone. Always. That's what was turning the place upside down. And that's what we were preaching. And that's what was going on around, Lyle Tarling's edges of Adventism.
It's a brilliant
In
book.
the West, we were doing it. Around Australia, it was happening. The preaching of the gospel of Christ. And that's why Des spoke out on the investigative judgment. Why? Because it didn't give you a surety.
Yeah.
And here's me talking as a virtual ex-Christian, mate. I'm not only an ex-Adventist, but I'm almost an ex-Christian. But that's what was turning. That's what was causing. That's what there's that investigative judgment. That we're already judged in Christ. It was not matching up
with 1844.
And I've been a president of two unions, mate. I was state secretary of the West Australian Tertiary Lecturers Association, NTU. You don't sack the workers. There must have been another 20 creative solutions that Parmenter could come without putting before Des a 10-point statement that he couldn't agree with. surely they could have done something. You don't, and underpaid workers too, Peter.
Back then.
And there were guys at Avondale, and there were people in the church, and some women. I mean, the smartest biblical language scholar in Adventism was Professor Leone something of Andrews. They could have got professorships in all sorts of places, mate. But they stayed in the church.
As a young fella, as I mentioned, you know, suddenly noticing all the energized gospel Bible preaching people who'd caught the fire. As I noticed they'd gone, I also noticed though that those that did stay would often, if I raised questions as I got into my 20s, they would say, look, things are changing, hang in there, it's going to change. And there was a time where Jan Paulsen kind of became president, where I think a lot of the more progressive Adventists felt like, see, it's changing, it's going to change. But the movement created, I think, by the Concerned Brethren, became so powerful, monetized, focused, organized, well-structured, with a genuine belief in their movement and what they were pushing for. I'm not doubting that or questioning that. I'm not judging it even. But they just kept on going, politicizing, and eventually Jan Paulsen's gone, Ted Wilson's in, Neil Wilson's son, no coincidence, maybe. And now we've got to a point in the Adventist Church where the compliance document was released.
Yes.
In the recent, was it the spring or autumn council, 6 unions were warned that they need to comply with this document. My prediction is that Ted Wilson will be president again end of 2020, and these sanctions, these documents and sanctions will gain more teeth. But still, I'm being told, no, hang in there, it's going to change. And as you know, I left 4 years ago because I thought, no, it is not going to change. And I can't bring up my little girls in this environment. I'd bring them up in my Avondale College environment days, but this environment. So where I'm kind of going with it all, you've left the church, but you see what's going on occasionally.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the compliance document? Like, is that like the church that had that moment where they had so many options they could have gone with instead of just booting out Des? That moment didn't happen. And so now we have the compliance document. And people have said, well, all religions need to have some kind of statement. But this is more than that. And Ellen White did a great thing by helping set up the unions, not the unions you were referring to, but the unions, so that people in their own territories could, make little adjustments for cultural differences.
Yes.
Whereas the GC is saying, no, global leadership. Ellen White would be rolling in a grave right now. But anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, Peter.
And do they have their roots in Glacier View?
What was that last point? What was that last question?
What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that trajectory has its roots in what happened at Glacier View?
Indeed. Unfortunately, they buried the 1919 Bible conference. When that came out, we were astounded, and then, and so pleased to read some things so fresh from the 19-teens, 1919.
Yeah.
Something so fresh for today. Yeah. And now we've had Glacier View, and that put a damper on things. And now you've got this compliance document, and the church doesn't have to be that rigid. See, one reason I left, Peter, when Lyle Heiss rang me up one day and said, Jack, why have you left? Well, I said, Lyle, it wasn't a house of prayer for all people. I said, I'm left of centre. I was left of the Adventist Church and left of centre. You know, I'm not left on. I said, you know, it's not a place for me. But Peter, it should be. And why not? Why not?
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, was theirs ever going to convert the concerned brethren? No.
No.
Was he ever going to trouble them? No. Was the lack of the investigative judgment ever going to trouble the church? I doubt it.
No.
Not at all. You know, the Adventist church has got health reform, it's got the state of the dead, it's got the Sabbath day, it's got a lot of wonderful doctrines, right? It's anti this and, you know, anti-smoking, anti-gambling, yeah, you know. And I wish I wasn't a gambler, though I would have liked to take money off Colin Standish for his prediction of the end of the earth, but it shut him up when he told me. But you know, they've got enough of these wonderful things to talk about, and really the investigative judgment was surely it's minor and unbiblical, and the only way that Cottrell, you know, could support it with his very fine paper on the investigative judgment was to believe in Ellen White. Ellen White's belief in it. That was the only way. One of our finest scholars.
Cottrell.
He ended his paper by using the apocalyptic as a Potter's-lesmatic principle, and accepted it on the basis of Ellen White. Now, I don't really think Cottrell ever accepted it, but in the paper, which probably was spread everywhere, he had to. So why have a compliance document? Why not let the church go, open up a little bit and keep the CBs and keep. Arthur Furch said to me one day at Avondale College, Johnny said, they're going to appoint me to be the ministerial secretary of the Australasian Division. He said, John, how do you think I'll go with the right? And how do you think I'll go with the left of the Adventist Church? I said, well, Arthur, with the right, you'll be right, because your theology is right of centre. And Arthur, with the left, you don't have to worry because they've all left.
Wow. No. Wow.
As Harry Baylis's PhD points out, and his book from his PhD. The biggest crisis ever Adventism came out of Glacier View. And as for the non-ordination of women, I don't get it. I said, when I was at Edith Cowan University, I brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the women at that university to gain PhDs and qualifications so that they could get promoted on the basis of equal merit. And when I was in the union, we had a 40% had to be for women. And to think we have a church in this day and age that doesn't. Again, sorry, I don't get it.
I don't get it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Yeah. I'm sitting there looking at my little 4- and 5-year-old girls, and I'm thinking, what? But this is the thing. I've said this before, and sorry for the story if people have heard it, but a friend of mine wrote to me when I left the church. He works quite high up in America in the NAD, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to really miss you, mate. Sorry that you know, all the best with your future." And I wrote back and said, "Dude, I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still me. I've just taken off this jacket that I just didn't agree with the doctrine and those policies that we just talked about. But I still love the people, and I still love the food, and I still love so many things about the amazing Adventists in the world."
Absolutely. And you know, as one of my colleagues used to say to me when I was lecturing at Avondale College to those beautiful young people, and delightful students, I had a big part.
Incredible, yeah.
Mate, they still, at 82 years old, they're still inviting me to birthday parties.
Well, I agree with you because
and they invite me to Test cricket, and you know,
to play.
No, to come and watch the Test cricket with them.
Amazing.
But as one of my colleagues said, John, he said, they're crazy. They're absolutely crazy. But they've produced beautiful young people.
I know. Yeah, I know. 100% agree. I sometimes get criticised because...
And why throw that away?
I know.
Because somebody says that the investigative judgment is not biblical, which it isn't. I mean, you couldn't make it up, Peter. You couldn't make it up. I try and explain some of it to me non-Adventist friends. And I say, John, you sure you haven't been drinking too much Bacardi and Coke?
I sometimes get criticised because I will challenge. Like, I've had times where literally every spectrum and faction has been having a go at me. And that's okay. I honestly don't mind. Like, there's nothing people could say that would offend me. I don't know why. I've just got thick skin. But I remember I've criticised some of the independent ministries, and sometimes I'll say something about Arise, or I'll say something even about one project, you know. But what people misunderstand is I agree exactly with what you're saying. I'd love to see a church that embraced Arise and embraced one project. And I've done interviews on our podcast where I've interviewed people that are associated with Arise, and they're wonderful people, fantastic people. The One Project people are amazing. There's all these great people. Maybe is it time there's already two churches in one, really. I wonder if it's time to maybe define the two groups a bit more, not to necessarily split, but maybe the more progressives could say, hey, we're going to structure our own leadership program and we'll still hang out with you guys. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on the future of Adventism?
Ron Lawson just published a paper on the numbers of Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. And the Adventists, of course, are still increasing in size. They're bigger than both the Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Brazil's the biggest country in the world, I understand, for Adventists now, followed by India, even after they cleaned up their rolls, and North America. Peter, the Adventist church will continue. It will continue because there will always be conservative folk around. There will always be folk who are interested in, with apologies, sectarian nonsense. And a lot of it is sectarian nonsense. There'll always be people interested in that. There'll always be a place for conservative folk to attend. There will always be a place for those who were born Adventists where their beliefs have come down in their mother's milk or from their grandparents. Yeah, there's a place for them. That's fine. That's fine. And the Adventist Church won't disappear until probably the whole of Christianity disappears, because you may have watched those graphs on the increase of Christianity and Muslim religions over the years. And in the last few years, some of the Muslim religions are just powering ahead. And maybe one day Christians will be like ancient Babylonians, very difficult to find. And if that's so, then Adventists may be even more difficult to find. But while there's a Christian church, there will always be an Adventist church. And whether it wouldn't be something that I would wish to return to or could return to. And they wouldn't accept me. Yeah.
To their loss.
And I'm very sad about that.
Mm.
That's the thing about Glacier View.
Mm.
Peter, it hurts.
Mm.
It hurts and haunts.
Yeah.
Couldn't sleep last night, couldn't play golf the other day.
Mm.
Won't be able to sleep tonight because it haunts me.
Mm.
And while it began at Glacier View, you know, and then there was the egg white crisis, and then there was Davenport, and then there was something else, and one doesn't just step out. For me, I didn't step away immediately because of Glacier View, because as I said previously, I'm a slow learner. And it finally sunk into me, even though it hit me like a ton of bricks back there. And it's, like I said, it's recorded here in my diaries and student cartoons and things on the wall.
Can you take a picture of that one you showed me the other day?
Yeah.
And take a picture of it and post it on the wall here. Put it on this thread.
You know,
a good one.
Finally, you know. And see, a lot of a number of the Adventist problems came out of Glacier View. Mm. Not just the investigative judgment, but the authority of Alan White on interpretation of Scripture. Is it a representative church? No, it's not. That came out of Glacier View. It's run by the leadership, and our church in Australia has been run by a couple of families, or a couple of families have been highly influential in the running of the Adventist Church. Now, that didn't do much for me as the son of a nobody. One of my mates at Edith Cowan, he became Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Western Australia or something, or Murdoch or something. And his father was very high up in education. And he said how difficult it was to be the son of somebody like that. I said, Charlie, you ought to try being the son of a nobody and see how difficult that is. And within the Adventist Church, you know, Glacier View sort of showed me that it was run by administrators, and prominent families had far too much to say within a church that was a house of prayer for all people. It was not.
Mm. John, we're going to have to leave it.
What have I finished?
But do you want to keep going? Part 2?
Mate, I didn't have it watched.
I'm planning at the end of this series.
Look, mate, look.
We haven't even started on.
Look, I had all these books
1981.
for you. Hey, I had here, mate. I had Martin Luther's speech here for you. I have a dream. I had a article here on Carmel College that I wrote.
Well,
I had an article here for you on Ellen White that I wrote.
Here's the interesting thing. This is social media, and people are writing down below and can ask you questions right now if you stick around.
Oh,
can
no.
you? Okay.
No, mate. Tell them not to phone me. Tell them not to email me. Not to put stuff on Facebook. Mate, look.
It's going to happen.
Mate, as soon as I leave here, I'm going to need a good, strong Bacardi and Coke, mate.
This is what I'll be leaving with.
Oh, that's better. That's better. That's a good Adventist boy. Yeah, and I had an article here on cheating in Adventist schools. Mate, I had pages of diary here that I underlined for you.
I was wanting to, before we do go, can you actually dig into some more of your comments in the diary?
Well,
You read some stuff before that was very poignant. Leave us with a couple of quotes. But it is like I could talk for hours with you, and I think one of the things I would love to convey to you is that you are a much admired, respected, and loved individual within people that you touched a lot of people with your personality and your inspiring words and your humor and your take no survivors. I remember one time you said it in a lecture, which really shifted my brain, I must say. You said someone had asked a question, and you said, "Oh, it doesn't really matter. 50 years after you're gone, you'll be forgotten anyway. All of us will." And I was like, yeah, wow, 50 years after I'm gone, no doubt I'll just be forgotten. So the things you've said to people, you never know how many people you've influenced in a really positive way. You've made people think, you've challenged people, you've been your authentic self. You're a much loved and admired person. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being you, John Godfrey.
Well, mate, I discovered, like young, that those things that were true in the morning of life, not necessarily so by the afternoon. I also discovered, they used to, is there life after Adventism? Life begins after Advent. Well, life began after Adventism for me, Peter. I started a brand new life at 50 years old. A new way of looking at religion, a new marriage, a new relationship with my children, a new relationship to religion, a new relationship to society. Adventism made me frightened of society. It made me realise that they would never get me now, Peter. They got me as a naive, young, uneducated railway man. Adventism would never attract me now. And I remember being down at the education, the New South Wales Teachers Federation Library, doing my PhD, reading one of their journals week after week after week. And Peter, I'd read it all before. Do you know where I'd read it all before? In journals like the Review and Herald and the Record
Mm.
talking about themselves. And so the New South Wales Teachers Federation with their education magazine were talking about themselves all the time.
Mm.
And that sort of thing. But yes, Peter, I
Becomes
miss
an
it.
echo chamber then, doesn't it?
Yeah, I miss it. But what I miss most of all is talking about Jesus. You know, I've never got over the fact that the scripture says that he died for the ungodly. I preached that with Des at Araloon before I went to heaven, that Christ died for the ungodly. It's always, impressed me. Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. That's what I miss. I don't miss the sectarian nonsense. I miss talking about Jesus. And while I have trouble believing, I still can't get over the wonder of even the historical Jesus, let alone the religious Jesus of the latter parts of the New Testament in the book of John. That's what gets me. That's what I miss. That's what I wish I could tell people about.
You kind of have tonight.
Anyway, mate, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm so stressed that I do badly need.
Mate, I don't want you to be stressed. I want you to
But
know that we're very grateful that you've spoken.
And by the time my horse runs at Ascot next Wednesday, I hope I've forgotten this.
I'm going to keep writing to you every week.
Oh, no,
I'm going to tag you. I'm going
no.
to, hey, John, what do you think about this?
No.
Mate, keep in touch.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you very much. And even though you won't be engaging with conversation, I just want to invite people below to just put your thoughts down, comments, queries. I'd love to track down Harry Ballas, actually. He'd be
Harry who?
Didn't you say Harry wrote a book on...
Harry Ballas.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I'd love to track Harry down.
I'm not sure, well, I mustn't talk for Harry, but I don't know whether he would...
Yeah, but he would have said that about you, and here you are. Mate, until next time, thank you very much.
And this is the problem, Peter. We had a dream.
Yeah.
Like Martin Luther, mate. We had a dream. And that dream got destroyed at Godfrey Glacier View. We wanted to talk about the righteousness of Christ.
That's tragic. Tragic.
I remember the last day I saw my father, the second last day. I preached at a church. I'm about to preach, and a CB minister from his own church left his own church to come and check up on me. And the sermon went flat. And I've never quite forgiven the CBs for that because, I was so nervous. My dad was there to hear me and had a tape recorder to hear me. He reckoned the sermon was so bad that he turned the tape off. Yeah. And
your dad said that to you.
My dad said that. And it had been set up so that I could preach.
That is sad because you wanted your dad to hear you in full flight and motion.
Why that minister wasn't back looking after his own flock? Because he was frightened that I might tell people. And you know where the sermon was on, Peter? Calvary. I mean, anyway, enough's enough. Love you.
Love you too, bro.
Yeah, great to see all you people out there. God bless you.
Talk soon.
Am I off air, Peter?
Not yet.
Oh.
it's funny. It's got this delay thing. We'll just sit here.
Good, darling.
I've got one fan here, Peter. My beautiful wife says I did good.
You did fantastic. Didn't he do a good job? Is it stopped? Has it stopped?
It's not saying recording at the top anymore.
But on the actual wall, I'll just check with my
Oh.
cohort.
My apologies to anyone I offended, Peter.
You haven't offended anybody. I'm just waiting to hear back. Yep, it's ended. We're safe. You can have a swig now.
Oh, good. Thanks, mate. Thanks, mate.
That was really good, John. I really appreciate that.
Oh,
And
sorry to get so excited, mate.
mate, it's if you weren't showing emotion about this incredible thing, you wouldn't be a human. Like it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy.
Absolute tragedy.
I wasted my life on it.
Yeah.
I didn't play Friday nights. I didn't do rock music. You know, I'm
And with a little bit of kindness, a little bit of common sense on the part of Parmenter, we could have still been part of it, mate.
the big takeaway tonight is where you were saying how they had so many other options they could have run with.
Yeah.
And
Intelligent men.
beautiful Adventist people.
And I remember talking to Graham Bradford, you know how you said it had changed, on the tennis court and complained. He said, John, stick around. It'll change. I stuck around and never changed.
When I listened to Bill the other night saying, "Oh, there's hope, it's going to change," I thought, man, it's demonstrably not going to change.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't wait till Ted Wilson or one of his cronies gets in again, and it will confirm it's not changing.
No.